how do we deal with China? And the fact that China has all of these, they've had several big, huge toxic scares already that have affected us. Either one.
I'm just going to repeat the question. The question is, how do we deal with China? Is the question.
One of the things is that we have to revisit these free trade agreements. And I think that it's very important for us to start to get some protections in these free trade agreements and not have the agreements on health and environment as lateral, not being part of a free trade agreement. You know, they're basically these bilateral. I don't think it was even an agreement. I'm sorry, it escapes me right now. But I think that's one of the ways. And then we learn from other countries. Like the European Union right now has a REACH program. And one of the ways that they're doing is that they're trying to get countries that import things into Europe to not, if they want to sell those products, not to have these products made. But it's very important that we also look at, remember what I said about the 99-cent stores? Things are taken off the shelves and put into, we need to make sure that we start pushing for products to become safer, and these chemicals are removed from the market and safer chemicals are brought in. If not, then REACH and whatever the United States does and other things like that, then China will just sell somewhere else, these products that are unsafe. So the goal is to try to get countries to stop using these toxic chemicals.
The question was for Jose about what other countries are doing. I think he answered if you want to say more. And then for Dr. Heindel, connection between depression and obesity.
The only other thing that I would add to that would be that I was trying to remember what it was. So the North American Free Trade Agreement has side agreements, and these side agreements are non-binding, and that's where the health and environmental piece is. It's not part of the actual free trade agreement itself, so that's why it's very important for us to relook at all these free trade agreements and start putting some protections for human health and environment into those.
So with regard to depression and obesity, I don't think right now there's any data on that. But as I mentioned, this is such a new field, and that's certainly an area along with the emotion, anything related to emotions is going to play a role. And there's going to be chemicals that are going to affect that. We just need to do more and look. You know, if you don't look, you don't find. And up until just maybe 5 years ago, all the endocrine disrupting chemicals were affected only the reproductive system. They were either estrogens, androgens, and one or two that affected the thyroid. Now that we've opened this area up, that basically has convinced people that every endocrine organ is going to be sensitive to these chemicals. And so we really have to start looking wider.
So Lisa's question was, there are some biomonitoring studies going on in Oregon right now for herbicides, and some of the response has been from some groups that this is normal to find herbicides in children's bodies, and she wants to ask Dr. Heindel how he feels about that, what the research says about that.
I think it turns out that it is becoming normal, meaning so many people, such a large percentage, have all these chemicals, including children. But it's certainly not okay, and we need to do something about it. And with regard to biomonitoring, I think we really need more biomonitoring. I think that's the starting point to convince people that how many chemicals and which chemicals and times of life. You know, when the CDC looks for chemicals, they look basically in adults, and they never looked at anybody below 6 years of age. And the kids from 6 to 12, 15, many times have 2 to 3 times the level of adults. And I wouldn't be surprised if the ones 6 and under had even higher. And they're, of course, the most vulnerable ones.
So So the question is Dr. Handel aware of any issues with nickel that leaches out of particular products and these issues of obesogens?
There's certainly a lot of data showing toxicity to nickel in a variety of places, but never been looked at for obesity or diabetes, I don't think.
So the question is, what are the challenges that are being faced in this emerging field?
So this is a young field, and we thought around 2005 or 6 that this was something worth pursuing and that there might be something really important there. We started funding a few grants. We started having symposia and workshops and writing articles, and it's really snowballed. In fact, this month in the NIEHS journal Environmental Health Perspectives, there's a centerpiece article on obesogens. And in Canada last month, there was a PBS type special, Our Chemicals Making Us Fat. So I think now the word is out more than the science. And it turns out it couldn't be a worse time to try to move an area of science forward when the funding levels are going down and are predicted to get even worse. But we're at a point now, yeah, we should stop talking a little bit and doing more research.
Right here.
This is a question for Jose. I'm wondering if you have ideas about how to get environmental justice into professional education.
So the question is how to get environmental justice into professional education.
Good. I was just before we came up to speak, I was commenting that the University of Michigan has a doctoral program in environmental justice, and then Xavier University has the EJ Center that also has a degree in environmental justice, and then I think now Dr. Robert Bullard has moved to Houston, and he is running a program out of Houston also on environmental justice.
Thank you.
And by the way, sorry,
No?
UC Berkeley also has a program on environmental justice.
So the question, just to repeat it, is basically sums up, should we move to a precautionary principle? I think I know what Jose is going to say, but I'll let him say it.
Well, again, I think it's very important for us to go that route, the precautionary principle route. But when you look at the UPIC people that are thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away from the closest industry, maybe a few thousand miles away from the closest industries, and their chemical load is very high, and in some instances higher than other loads in the lower 48, then does that model also exist there, right? I mean, is that applicable? Because one of the things that we've been seeing is that, and a lot of what is produced in those big cities, a lot of what is produced from pesticide spraying and other things like that carry for miles and miles and thousands of miles sometimes. And we've known that for a long time. So again, I think the approach should be to remove the danger out of products and things, so that the engineering around green chemistry, some of the engineering is very, very good, but it's still at its infancy. But we were talking a little bit outside about biomimicry. It's very, very important to take our cues and clues and learn from the environment and how the environment has really dealt with a lot of things over the whole history of the earth. So, for instance, the redwood forest, it thrives on fire. As it burns, the pods come down and seedlings come up. So what makes that redwood forest not, the redwood tree not burn? So instead of putting brominated flame retardants in people's pillows and the cribs for children, what can we learn from the redwood tree to mimic that to keep people safe? And then I do want to say that it's very, very important for us to look at the strategies being used by the chemical industry around all these things. Because when it comes to brominated flame retardants, the brominated flame retardant industry has hired a person that used to be work for a senator, and is now going around the country with people of color, burn victims, advocating for brominated flame retardants, because they say that emergency responders take at least 6 minutes more to respond in people of color communities than they do in white communities, so they need that brominated flame retardant in order to safeguard that. And the tests all show that you get a 3-second head start. And that's so false, you know, what the brominated flame retardant industry is putting out there. But that's some of the what's happening. And when they go to visit Capitol Hill and a lot of other people with burn victims that say we need brominated flame retardant, it's very hard, you know, for a lot of people sometimes to make the right decisions.
But the other thing that the industry does with flame retardants and also with the emulsifiers, the PFOAs and PFOSs, is that there are a large number of them, and the government bans one, and they just change the structure a little bit and put out the next one, and they don't test it at all, and it could be even worse.
That's what happened with methyl bromide and methyl iodide.
Right there in the middle.
Hello, my name is Tracy Deere. I'm from Washington Physicians of Social Responsibility in Seattle, north of here. Dr. Handel, I have a question for you about obesogens. Have you come across, well, we know that food scientists are manipulating seed to grow food as fast as possible, that looks as lovely as possible and can ship the longest distance across the world and get the greatest profit. That's been going on for 20 years in our food labs. Now it's happening, of course, not just in crops, but in finished products that we're pulling off the shelves. Have you come across a contribution of evidence in tests that contribute to obesity, that this food that we're eating in some cases has none of the traditional value that a tomato had, for example? It just looks good, it's pretty, but it has no nutritional value. And is that showing up in research at this point?
So just to repeat the question very quickly, the question is the connection between basically some new and novel food technologies that we've seen in the last few decades and that our impact on the obesity epidemic, is that correctly?
We call that Frankenfood.
Like
Yeah, I don't know any data really related to that, except, you know, for the fact that there's so much sugar intake these days. The focus has been on fat being so bad, and maybe fat's bad, but sugar is really bad, and that's what's really gone up. And so when you see these ads on TV that say sugar is sugar, it doesn't matter if it's high fructose corn syrup or cane sugar, that's, you know, absolute false. So they used to say a calorie is a calorie, but it's not true. A calorie of glucose is not the same as a calorie of fructose, because a calorie of fructose, 20% automatically goes to fat. And it interferes with the leptin signaling in the brain to tell you that you're full and you eat more. So that's one of the really insidious things that we're coming across out there.
Thank you.
But what's true is that the obesity epidemic is really going around the world. It's not as big, certainly in Denmark, as here, but it's increasing there too. But when you do go there, you see a completely different kind of lifestyle. And what we would really like to know is, yeah, what is the chemical exposures there compared to the United States? But we have a lot to do yet. in the general area of endocrine disruptors, we always use DES and smoking as really the proof of principle. These women were exposed, they have a variety, they're exposed during pregnancy. The offspring, the boys and the girls, have a myriad of problems, and we can trace all of those problems back to disruption of endocrine signaling due to estrogen, and that's what DES is, an estrogenic hormone. And what makes it so important is people say, well, animal studies don't really count, and they want to just throw those out. And in this case, every animal study that has shown some effect has been proven out in the human population. And in fact, the animal studies 10 years ago predicted that DES would show up with increased breast cancer in the daughters, and now we're starting to see that. So that's why it's such a good example. But guess what? Just this morning I saw that during pregnancy it's been approved to give progestins to prevent miscarriage, just like they did with DES. And there are other chemicals, glucocorticoid mimics and things that are being given to tens of thousands of women during pregnancy, and they're not getting this message of developmental origins of disease and don't play around with pregnancy.
Just a comment on that. The progestins in pregnancy, just approved this morning, been used for at least a decade, off-label, in pregnancy to prevent miscarriage. So they've been used for years and years. So just because it was approved today, it's been used for years and years.
So DES was on the market 30, 40 years before it showed up? We've been using soy baby formulas for 50 years, and of course it's completely safe. Why is that safe? Because nobody has seriously looked. It's an estrogenic product given to babies during a sensitive time. But of course it's safe.
I also wanted to mention something really quick. One of the things that we're seeing, and that when we came together at UC Berkeley to look at the green chemistry future, is that we see universities that put out PhDs on chemical engineering, the different, all these different degrees in chemical engineering and chemistry, but we rarely see people go through, even at the PhD level, classes on how chemicals affect health. So I think that's a clue for the universities, is that you should start requiring people that are graduating with chemistry degrees to also take health classes. And so people are more conscious about the correlation of chemicals to health.
Well, great. Let's give a round of applause for our keynote.